It's also possible one of my kids will come through this door because every event that I've had, one of my kids have come through that door.
That's the danger of all being at home together.
Yep.
The amount of times that I've been on like a work call and like my dad like comes through and is like, I'm leaving to go somewhere. And I'm like, I'm on a call.
Get out of here.
A closed door in my house is an invitation, unfortunately.
I understand that.
It's like, oh, something important is going on in there. Let me find out what that is.
How important can it be if they're not there, right?
Right. Exactly.
It sounds like cat mentality.
Yeah.
Well,
Be where you are.
Cats, kids, same thing. My dog does the same thing.
We don't have any cats. We have a dog, and he at any given point in time he'll like start like yelling. He's like, I'm angry. Everyone needs to know. Like there's something across the street and you need to be aware right now at like the worst time. Always something.
My dog likes to pace around my apartment, and so you might hear like tick 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 as her nails like go across the floor. But I think she's decided that whatever I'm doing is very boring, so she's gone to lay down in bed.
That's nice. All right, so I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Hi, everyone who's joined in for the Outwrite Chapbook reading. All of these lovely individuals you are going to see read today have won the 2020 Chapbook contest. So we are lucky enough to have them showcase their talents for us this evening. So without any additional preamble, I'm going to start introducing our first reader. Charles Jensen is the author of the poetry collection Nanopedia and 6 chapbooks of poems, including the recent Story Problems and Breakup/Breakdown. His first collection, The First Risk, was a finalist for the 2010 Lambda Literary Award. His poetry has appeared in American Poetry Review, Crab Orchard Review, Field, The Journal, New England Review, and Prairie Shooter. He is the founding editor of the online poetry magazine Locust Point, which explores creative work on a city-by-city basis. He lives in Los Angeles and directs the writers program at UCLA Extension. So without further ado, Charles, please read for us. Thanks.
Thank you, and thanks to Tyrese for selecting this title for the chapbook competition. Feel very honored to be introduced by you. I'm going to read an excerpt from my essay from the chapbook called Monsters in the Closet / Scream. And it's going to bounce back and forth between a personal essay about my life and some discussion of the movie Scream. I hope that you'll be able to tell the difference between what I lived and what is the horror movie, but I will also give you date cues and title cues along the way. October 1996. Students gawked at the pedestrian bridge that crossed the Mississippi River between the East Bank and West Bank campuses of the university. In the night, a group of students wheat pasted 18 by 24-inch sheets of paper to the bridge, each one featuring the photo of a notable figure from history with 3 words describing their legacy: James Baldwin, American novelist, activist, queer. Straight students were outraged by these displays. Some stuck their chewed gum to the faces of the writers, actors, politicians. Some just blacked out the word queer. I walked and looked at each one, taking it in, each Xerox page washed gold in sunrise. Though I had to keep my queerness a secret from most of the people around me, I felt that, in that moment, like I was plugged into something bigger, something unseen that was tired of living in the shadows. By then, I was out to my parents, mostly out of fear they'd hear some gossip among friends and find out the hard way. But I was still coming out, daily, to people I'd just met and people I'd known for years. For a long time, these people would confide in me that I was the first gay person they knew. That you know, I'd say. Scream. In the moments leading up to the climax, Billy and Stu have revealed to Sydney that they are the killers. They explain to Sydney that they're going to ask her a series of questions, and no matter their answers, she's going to die. Stu sidles up behind Billy and places his head on Billy's shoulder. It's intimate, capturing them in a two-shot in this tender pose, even as they're covered in blood. They look like they could be in love. January 1997. My friend Lori encouraged me to join a group called SHADE sophomore year. Sexual Health Awareness and Disease Education was housed in the School of Public Health and led by Dave, a tall guy with wild graying hair who radiated positivity and support. There were about 15 of us in the cohort. I was offered special permission to join the group in the second quarter, even though I had not taken the required public health course on STDs, and I instead learned the scripts for various presentations we gave on campus and in the community, teaching consent, good sexual health practices, and providing the most up-to-date information to other students. The AIDS epidemic continued to ravage the gay community in the mid-90s. My high school health class had mentioned AIDS exactly once when my teacher told us, if you have gay sex, you will get AIDS and die. Though I knew intellectually how to protect myself, condoms were then the most reliable method of prevention and also freely available almost everywhere, especially on a college campus. The lack of research and public information made it a challenge to believe in any idea of safety. It was rare in those years for someone to disclose their HIV status. The stigma was too strong, and there was too much at stake. They could be fired, they could lose their housing, any number of devastating actions could be taken against them, but it also meant facing stigma from within the queer community as well. As a public health crisis, those fighting to stop the spread of AIDS took drastic measures to change sexual behavior, sometimes seeming to echo the words of my health teacher. The Red Cross banned sexually active gay men from giving blood, a prohibition that continues to this day, even when we have much more reliable information about transmission, detectability, treatment, and prevention. For me, and for some members of my microgeneration of gay men who came out after the crisis began, but before good information was widely available, AIDS was terrifying. We knew thousands of men died slow, difficult deaths in the 80s and 90s. We did not want to be among them. When I came out to my parents, they told me they were afraid I would die of the disease. SHADE marched in the homecoming parade the next year, and I wore the comical full body costume for the event, a long gauzy tube with a cutout for my face and a rubber hat shaped like a receptacle tip. I handed out condoms along the parade route as other members of the group marched with our banner and handed out handbills about our work. SHADE undid a lot of the shame and discomfort I felt around sexuality. I was forced to talk about it publicly and to help people make safer choices. By extension, I made safer choices. Screen. Billy spends most of the first act of the film trying to have sex with Sydney. He's perfected the toxically male performance of acting like he doesn't want it too much, but making it clear that he does, in fact, really want it, but only if she's ready. And if that turned out to be now, that would be great. Billy pops up through her second-story window like if Romeo were played by James Dean. In the end, Sydney flashes her breasts at him as if to show him she's trying. After they've had sex and Billy steps out as one of the two ghost faces, he tells Sydney she was bad in bed. What he means is, you didn't please me. What he suggests is, I couldn't be pleased by you. What he reveals is, I want something else. October 1996. I stood against the wall in the basement of the campus's gay fraternity near the bar, nursing my cup of party punch and trying not to make eye contact with anyone, even as I gazed longingly at any number of men who passed by me. What did I want? To be touched, loved, but not seen, acknowledged, known. The fraternity was an anchor of the queer social scene. Though I wasn't a member, I was a fan of their parties. Their house stood at the end of Fraternity Row, tucked around a corner as if seeking just a bit more privacy than the other houses, as if they were more modest, more conservative. Inside the house, where the couches and side tables crouched along the walls, and the spinning strobes and colored lights flashed while insistent beats played, the opposite was true. Everyone was more themselves there, as though passing through the threshold meant taking off or putting on one's public costume. I love these parties, in part because it was easy to get booze, and booze quieted my anxieties and insecurities. My queerness felt like a train passing me in the night, cars I could look into as the windows flashed by, but something I didn't occupy, something that wasn't carrying me. I was afraid of having sex, and I was afraid of never having sex, afraid of being left alone, and afraid of being fully myself. My good friend Karen walked up and introduced me to a man whose name I can no longer remember. He had short, dark hair with bangs swept away from his face, 5 o'clock shadow working overtime. He had a kind face. He wasn't in school, he was older, mid-20s maybe. Karen hovered for a few minutes, then excused herself to let us talk. I don't remember what the man and I talked about, but I know he asked me if I wanted to go home with him. I was outside my body talking to him. I heard myself say, sure. I was drunk, or at least drunk enough, which was my goal. In the car to his place, it took 5 minutes for me to lose our location. I vanished into the city with him. I was 19. I fumbled out of my clothes at his apartment. I kissed him. I felt his body over me. He asked if he could fuck me, but I demurred. Then he fell asleep. In the morning, he offered me breakfast. I said no, I wanted to go home. Was I sure he could whip something up or we could go out? No, I said. I pulled myself into my coat to armor me. He tried to make conversation on the way home, but I couldn't. I must have seemed like a miserable person. He dropped me at the door of my dorm, and I never saw him again. Good thing he didn't murder you, my friend said at breakfast when I told her what happened. She was half joking. I hadn't considered my safety in all of this, a privilege of being born white and male. The next summer, a young gay man launched a killing spree from Minneapolis, traveling down the continent to Miami, where he shot Versace on the front steps of his mansion. I watched it unfold on the news. I considered myself, somehow, lucky. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was fantastic. Charles's book is available for purchase at Neon Hemlock. And our next reader is Lanny Stabile. Lanny Stabile, a queer Detroiter, often says that while some write like a turtleneck sweater, she writes like a Hawaiian shirt. Lanny's first published collection, Little Masticated Darlings, is now out with Wild Pressed Books. Individual works are published forthcoming in Frontier, Entropy, Pigeonholes, Glass Poetry, and more. Lanny currently holds the position of managing editor at Barron Magazine and is a member of the MMPR Collective. She is a Best of the Net and Pushcart Prize nominee. So Lanny, can you please read for us?
Absolutely. Thanks for introducing me. I also wanted to say thank you to Phalia Hicks, who chose my book. I actually just finished their book, Hoodwitch, for the Seeley Challenge yesterday, and it's amazing. So like it means even more to me knowing that someone that talented chose my book. Also, thank you to Dave Ring for making my book beautiful. I love it so much. And without further ado, I'm gonna start where the book starts. My greatest fear is turning into my mother. Childhood was boxes and crates and hope chest and bunk bed and pillows and sleepless nights and keep the light on for reading and utility bills and cable bills and mortgage and no insurance until 16 and scraped elbows and chipped teeth and busted head from softball, and it doesn't look like you need stitches, and sewing patterns and newspapers and drawings from preschool and expired Farmer Jack ads and birth certificates somewhere around here, and holes in walls and no room to walk and cigarette air and black ring tub. And is that a roach? And dog and cat, and hairy couch and hairy chair and hairballs and dust balls and mothballs and broken Bissell, and 5-foot trophies and perfect attendance awards and lifetime originals and NCIS and please record the nanny. encrusted pans and sticky pots and food bank beans and mayonnaise sandwiches and first kiss and first hand job and first blow job and first bruise when dad finds out. And man knees and man hands and man breath and man beer and man vodka and man against man and tantrums and bipolar and manic depression and 911 and suicide attempts and crying before school and growing up fast and holding on to too much and can't move and can't breathe and can't seem to locate anything, including an exit. And chances are I will lose sight of the mother and perish inside this childhood. So this next one I wrote when my mom was in the ICU. She's actually in the ICU every year around Easter for whatever reason. That's her schedule. So this is about that. Karen Kilgariff says the death of a mother is like a slow motion shark attack. And the danger lurks within a tender body attended to by great white lab coats. Consumption is a week-long special and everyone is tuning in. Panic ripples through the daughter like an endless wave of teeth. Mama drops from her mouth, one more fossil on the ocean floor. The most dangerous fish. When temper swims through a man's hands, he becomes a contaminated stream, growing scales thick as convenience store bricks. When I was 12, the most dangerous fish was a bottle of cheap wallop. $2 for 40 ounces of menace. We young minnows thrash our tails against the current, feeling for the dry bank in our mother's river. With gaping lips, we ask, why must we remain belly up? And our mothers answer, because we are hooked on weakness. It's true what they say. The last thing a fish notices is water. I'm actually going to shift to my dad. And this is actually where my attire comes in. It was like a deliberate nod for my dad. It's called My Father Wears a Hawaiian Shirt to Die In. I don't remember him besides hide and seek, a perfect pair of slippers calling out as I titter beneath a crib. But everyone weathered with my blood says I was daddy's girl. I helped him fold and tuck a bed, laundry, the lining of his casket. He was patient as the earth. A Baptist minister, he never swore. Two things orbited him: Jewish ancestry, a dark and obvious comet he feared might plummet on Germanic command, and a dim horseshoe of hair like nailing it between his ears would bring him luck. But still, he died at the kitchen table in a Hawaiian shirt with a Pepsi in his hand, a last word like gas through his teeth. Shit. And I also wanted to read a poem about my brother. My father and my brother, they're not like the main focus in my book, Strange Furniture, but they're certainly there, just kind of things that are unattainable that I always wanted to have a relationship with. This one is called Sibling Rivalry. He starts the conversation with, I don't always agree with the things you do, followed by a long list of things he does not always agree with that I do. Of course, I cannot get offended because my brother ends with, but I still love you because you're family. 20% of meerkats are killed by their own kind. If she senses a defect, a mother hamster will eat her tiny pink pups. Hyena cubs often attack siblings not yet emerged from the amniotic sac. And once I called the police when his hands gnawed at my throat. And to shift again, this is also about my mother. A few years ago, I discovered that I just don't have good birthdays. Like my birthdays tend to be about other people. Like things just kind of happen and then I don't get celebrated, or I get pushed off, or the Red Wings are in the Stanley Cup playoffs and nobody wants to pay attention to me. So this is called My Birth Has Often Been About Secrets. My mother fell off a concrete porch and woke in the summer spireas with knowledge of my blooming body. The radiologist ran her gloved finger over the Rorschach flower, pointing out male privilege and a healthy heartbeat. My father cried when I was born inverted, but I was still named for him. The year I was gifted both a swing set and a party, I was also banned from competing. The games and prizes are for the guests, Mother said, plucking my petals. But I swung the highest and leapt the farthest anyway. Ronald Reagan died the week I turned 17, the very day my friends gathered beneath lush canopies in the park to celebrate. I could think only of the dead president and how he ruined my hot dog. I knew a man who threw a party once he fucked 100 women. He called it an induction to the Century Club. The night after my best friend slept with him, I spent my birthday chewing the perfect medium ribeye her boyfriend grilled for me, wilting with every bite. A pregnant sister revealed her quiet thorn to me on Mother's Day. 2 weeks later, the news rattled in my own unsettled belly. As I cut the cake into controlled triangles, the word mum thumping behind my lips. My mother called me yesterday. She sang to me and asked about my life. I was sitting on the patio, sweeping away the helicopter seeds, thinking, for once, she's asking about me. This is a real short one. My mom, she loves to be a mom. So like whenever there were children in the neighborhood, she would welcome them into her house and they would call her mom. And that was troubling. It's called Birding. You were everyone's Mama Robin, cracking a warm egg over the fledglings in the neighborhood. I could not move without brushing against the wings of your adopted flock, even as I squawked for the nest to empty. After all, shouldn't blood paint your red breast without the stretch of hungry necks? This maternal clutching, this communal roosting is how I found myself sniped and unfeathered, watching Mama Robin cooing and Mama Robin churring, Mama Robin loving all the birds. And I just wanted to finish with the title poem, Strange Furniture. I think it's a great way to wrap up as it's the penultimate poem to the book. If asked where my hands are, I can tell you I've hidden them in the intuition that grows thick and tenebrous inside these walls. If asked how I got here, I can tell you there were more stairs than saints, up and down and affixed to brick, like Escher's Relativity or that scene in Labyrinth. But instead of searching for a choleric brother, I swallowed rocks for stability. If asked about my indelicate frame, I can tell you the furniture is strange here. Nothing quite fits the corners, nothing fills that aching space. Basically, my PTSD is a knotted area rug and 2 wishbone chairs rescued from a resale shop. But never have I been salvaged. If asked, what now? I can tell you, there are matchsticks in my neck, tense, kindling, and I am 1 strike away from burning this place down. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That was a fantastic reading. And you can find, along with Charles's book, Lanny's book on Neon Hemlock. And we are moving on to our last reader, Paula Molina Acosta. Paula Molina Acosta graduated with a women's studies degree from the University of Maryland. Go Terps, I'm a Terp too, hey girl. Where she was a member of the Jimenez Porter Writers House program. She has been published in Stylus, the University of Maryland's literary journal, and was a finalist for the Jimenez Porter Prize in Poetry. She lives on the Maryland side of the DMV. So please give us a reading, Paula.
Yes, thank you so much for your introduction. Of course, I have to thank River Solomon, who's the judge of the fiction contest, who selected my work. I'm very, very grateful to them. And I'm also very grateful to Dave Ring, who made the incredible cover for my chapbook, which I'm so excited about. It's so, so pretty. And of course, for like all the support. I am going to be reading from the first story in my chapbook because it contains 2 stories. And I'm just gonna be reading from the first one, which is called Grounded. In the muggy air, all she could do was keep her eye on the sky above and think to herself again, another fucking heat wave. The camp sat atop a little hill, its entrance just across the road from the launch yard. The refugees' quarters, a structure built like a stack of cubbies, wrapped around a courtyard that in busier years housed the overflow in makeshift tents. It was empty now, dedicated to cooking fires and space for children to burn off energy. The grass had long since worn away. Above, laundry lines stretched between rooms so that the sun's glare filtered through 500 families Sunday washing. In the open center of the courtyard, Issa played soccer with the other children. In their mercy, the older children had allowed the younger ones to weigh the teams unevenly, so that the 6 older ones had to get past an army of toddling babes. Though she lived in the awkward space just before adolescence, Issa's height and her ownership of a soccer ball had granted her the role of the token older child on the younger children's team. The baby fat of her cheeks jiggled as she ran, a massive hand-me-down jersey hanging off her like an ill-fitting dress. Her black hair was slicked back into a thick ponytail, and it bobbed as she stole the ball from an older boy, who growled back at her. She stuck out her tongue and bolted down the field. Catching a glimpse of Ebby on the sidelines, she waved. The boy stole the ball back. Issa dove after him. Ebby would have to start dinner soon. Exhaustion dragged at her eyes, and her legs still ached from the line. She watched the first clouds appear at the corner of the sky. Another joined them, then another. For each that disappeared at the other end of the sky, 2 more popped up. Another moment or 2 wouldn't hurt. She kept an eye on Issa's game. She was already so tall. From here, Ebby could look past the game and out the front gates, where the launch yard across the road shone in the afternoon light. The launch yard stretched almost as far as the eye could see, an expanse of gray and concrete patterned with cracks and lumps. The launch sites were located on the horizon, miles from civilian life, but the dormant ships themselves sat in rows a few hundred yards from the perimeter, waiting their turn to be towed away, stuffed with fuel, and pointed at the sky. Even the dustiest, most scuffed and scratched ship in the yard still shone like stars. Chain link fences ran the whole perimeter of the launch yard. Ebby remembered when armed guards had paced the stretches between each fence, back when a discreet payment and a smile to the right man was enough to get you slipped in between the supply shipment boxes and loaded onto an outgoing launch ship. Now the only interruption in the fences were the sight drones. They followed the refugees, dark eyes glaring at each of them in turn. All the refugees knew to keep their distance. Sight drones fired without warning if you came too close. Abby looked back at the game. It had broken down with the unfairness of it all, as it often did. She watched Issa step in and rearrange the teams, pointing out older players to trade to the younger one's team, each for 2 or 3 of the younger children. After a moment of bargaining, the teams were more evenly weighted and the game resumed. Abby sat back, relishing the moment of peace. The ground beneath her was thin, dusty dirt. Years of makeshift shelters, children's games, and refugee pacing had packed it down so that when it rained, it didn't even turn to mud. The water rolled right off it. Abby! Abby looked up. Out the front gate, Abby could see people filing in, 1 or 2 at a time, past the soldiers' checkpoints. Hey, baby! A short woman in worn and much mended clothing was coming up the center entrance, trickling in with a group of familiar faces. The Agro Farm's day shift. The warm brown of her skin gleamed. She waved at Abby, her sleeves caked with dirt that never quite washed out. Julietta's dark hair rippled with traces of bleach blonde, the breeze catching hold of it and flinging it round her shoulders so that the sunlight caught the color and made it shine. She was grinning. Despite her overstuffed knapsack, she walked with a lightness to her step that made her hips sway. Abby's stomach fluttered. She looked beautiful, even with the humidity frizzing her hair, and a too large belt wrapped around her waist to hide that the zipper on her coat was broken. Then Abby frowned. It had been months since she'd seen the sunlight in Julietta's hair like that. She usually wasn't home for another 2 hours, when the sky was already darkening. Hey, Julietta, Issa shouted. The girl abandoned her game, running for the woman like a bullet. Laughing, Julietta dodged the child's attack, pulling her in for a hug instead. Issa was already grown past Julietta's shoulders. You're home early. Just for you, crazy, she chuckled. She ruffled the girl's hair. Smiling, Julietta leaned over the girl and kissed Abby. She tasted like cilantro and smelled like earth. You're home early, Abby noted, her eyebrows furrowing slightly. Julietta's eyes flitted away, then back to Issa, who hadn't yet let her go. I brought us a treat, she smiled. Issa, baby, want to see? She turned her back to the girl and offered her the knapsack. Issa reached in, eyes wide, and pulled out 2 great bunches of broccoli. Each was nearly as big as her head. The girl's mouth dropped. They're rejects, Julietta said, seeing Abby's eyes furrow and her mouth open to protest. They had just a little bit of mold on them, but I cut it right off and they're good as new. She batted her eyes at Abby. What, you gonna turn down a free meal? Come on, Abby, Issa insisted, bouncing with the broccoli in each hand. Her hair leapt with each movement, round and jerking like a jellyfish possessed. We still have some garlic in the room we can use, and you always say not to waste food. The 2 of them turned their faces up at Abby, their eyes wide and quivering. Fine, Abby relented. Julietta and Issa grinned, hissing a triumphant yes together, and Abby had to crack a smile. Go play, Issa, before it gets dark. I want to talk to Julietta. Issa paused for a moment, a broccoli in each hand, and looked back and forth between the 2 women. Julietta winked at her, the picture of serenity. After a moment, Issa handed over the vegetables and took off back to the soccer game that had gone on without her. Broccoli for your thoughts? Asked Julietta, one eyebrow raised, offering Abby a vegetable. You're home early, Abby said again. She crossed her arms. Is everything okay? Julietta's eyes flitted between Abby's, measuring the dip of her eyebrows and the set of her cheekbones. She sighed. They let a bunch of us go, she admitted. She hurried to talk over the drop of Abby's face. We'd been hearing rumors for a few weeks about layoffs, but Julietta, what are we gonna do with only one of us working? Abby demanded. She ran her hand over her head, sweat peeking out between the remnants of her hair. Her mouth was suddenly very dry and she wondered if someone had hit her. We barely make ends meet now. We haven't even been able to save up and now you've gone in. It's not my fault they're downsizing, Julietta countered. They kept some people on, didn't they? They didn't keep them on, Julietta corrected, her brows twisting. Even frowning, her face was lovely. They're just firing them later. They're shutting everything down. What the hell for? Jacob said they started rolling out agro farms on the moon. They're phasing out imports and growing local right in the cities. Julietta rolled her eyes and crossed her arms. They're expanding. Okay, Abby said, rubbing her eyes. She felt like walking, but she had nowhere to go, not without drawing attention to herself. She shifted from foot to foot. Damn it, okay, maybe if we can get them to hire you. They're hiring people already up there, Julietta corrected. You sure? Yeah, she said, I'm sure. Fuck, Abby snarled at the ground. Shit. How was the line? Julietta asked, lowering her voice. Nothing, Abby shook her head. I waited all day, I didn't even get to my turn. Nobody got in? I think they handed out one travel ban, Abby said. To some guy, an engineer or something useful? She rubbed her eyes. Jacob mentioned new factories opening up north. Ebby said. She tucked a particularly blonde strand of Julieta's hair behind her ear. We could try getting a better job up there. There's never a better job, Ebby, Julieta argued. It's the same north, it's the same everywhere. She wrapped her hands around Ebby's waist. Everywhere is the same thing. We can talk about this later, Ebby murmured. Why don't I get started on the broccoli? A rumble cut her off. It was a deeply familiar sound that made Ebby's bones ache. She and Julieta locked eyes, their conversation forgotten. It's darker, Ebby observed. She looked out at the courtyard. Above, the clouds were churning like soup in a cauldron. A light flashed in the murky depths. Thunder brewed in the distance. The sky had stained the world a ghostly blue. In the center of the courtyard, the children still chased the deflated soccer ball. Dyed gray, blue, and purple beneath the storm, they looked like they played underwater. In her oversized jersey, Issa drifted across the field like a wayward plastic bag through the depths. Issa, Ebby called. On the field, Issa looked up, the whites of her eyes gone bright in the blue light. Ebby tucked the broccoli into Julieta's knapsack and zipped it shut, then shrugged her jacket on. Get inside, she ordered. Issa snatched up her soccer ball to the heated protests of several older boys and darted over. With her ball under one arm, she slipped her hand into Julieta's and took off into the building, hauling Julieta after her. Ebby trotted in behind them.
Thank you so much. So we have some more time. So I wanted to chat with you guys and see what you all have been working on since you submitted these lovely chat pieces to Outwrite, and now that they're going to be coming out soon. So if we could start with Charles, maybe kind of let us know what you've been up to.
Well, I'll be really honest. I am finding it impossible to write during this time. But I do have a full collection version of the essays that are from the chapbook, where each one tells a story from my life, and then also has criticism about a film attached to it and bounces back and forth between the two. So I'm eager to get back to that project. Some of the essays are a real mess and they need a lot of renovating. So that'll be the first thing I tackle when my life gets back to normal.
I feel you. I feel you on that. I think everybody who writes is struggling with finding not necessarily inspiration, but the focus to get there. So thank you. Lanny, are you doing anything fun?
Yeah, absolutely. So I just finished a larger collection that interweaves stories of Zeus and his sexual assault with different women, but also there was actually one occurrence of him assaulting a man. And then interweaving that with personal stories of sexual assault. So that's actually a pretty big like passion project for me. So I just finished that, looking for a home. And then just recently I decided that it'd be a great idea to do form poems and create a collection on that. And I just discovered golden shovels, which are kind of similar to acrostics, but like each line ends with one word of a quote. And the quote that I decided I was going to write about my dad, because I don't write a lot about him. And I'm using, instead of quotes, dad jokes. So that's something that I'm working on right now. It's really exciting.
Wow, that sounds really fun. I am a personal fan of dad jokes, so I would love to read that. And Paula, are you working on anything right now?
I definitely echo about it being super hard to write right now. I feel like my brain is like fried just with everything going on. But I have been working on some of my own stuff. I actually just graduated college, not to out myself, but so I graduated in like the middle of a pandemic, and I like came home like for coronavirus to like my parents' house. And so I've been like going through all these like pieces of writing that I started and like never developed like while I was like in school. And so I'm fleshing those out. I'm hoping that there will be a novel or novella in some of them. And so I'm doing a little work with some of that. But yeah, just throwing a bunch of projects together as I can make it work, I think.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yeah, congratulations. Were you an English major at Maryland?
No, I was women's studies major. I loved
Women's
women's studies
studies.
department.
I was an English major, and so I lived in Susquehanna. That was where I took most of my classes, and also slept on the couches in the lounge in between classes a lot. So.
Very nice. I was in the Commons building right next to Susquehanna. So
yeah, gotcha. So that was probably a lot easier.
yeah, I was there. It was very, very quick walk. But I was not an English major, but I was creative writing minor, which is very, very fun. It's like discount English major.
Right. So thank you, everyone. Oh, let's see. We have a question in the chat. Let's check that out. So here's a question for you all. If writing is hard right now, are there any writers that are helping you cope with these terrible times, or anything fun, or not necessarily fun, but distracting in a way that is also helping you cope with these times that you are reading right now? So maybe we'll go in the opposite direction, and Paula, you can answer that question for us first.
Mm-hmm. I think when stuff is like weird, I always fall back on like my favorite books. And so I have been conducting a thorough rereading, start to finish, of all the Percy Jackson books. And so it's been very fun. And so I think my brother and my sister are definitely ahead of me on that. And so, but it's been very fun. I've just been going through like my library of all my favorite books from like growing up, which is not very intellectual of me, but I'm having a good time. So.
You know, no one said you had to be intellectual, number one.
True.
And number two, you know, this is the perfect time to luxuriate in escapism in whatever form that it takes. So do not apologize for that.
Comfort reading. So.
Exactly. Lanny, what are you up to?
I just wanted to say quickly that my wife is actually a 6th grade teacher, and she teaches Percy Jackson, the first book. And she always has them do their "Who's Your Parent?" And like anytime, there was this one girl who got Poseidon, and then she just kept going around the classroom going, "Poseidon is my daddy. Poseidon is my daddy." And I think about that story, it makes me laugh so much. So yes, to the YA, love YA. What I've been doing, because I did find it difficult to write at first too, until I just kind of started doing some form poems, and then it forced me to. But I have been reading a lot, and I've been reading a lot of like nonfiction, so like self-development. Right now I'm reading The Happiness Project by Gretchen Rubin. I'm doing the Sealy Challenge, as I mentioned earlier, reading a lot of chapbooks, and just kind of trying to tackle the people that I interact with on Twitter, not tackle them, but tackle their works, and finally get around to writing the oh my God, I'm blanking on the word. Like writing Amazon reviews. There we go. Reviews on Amazon's and Goodreads, and just kind of like catching up and being a good Twitter friend.
That's really, and it's also, you know, not just being a good Twitter friend, but being a good community member. Yeah. I mean, and that's really important. So thank you for that. Charles, what are you reading? What's helping you cope?
Well, I'm also struggling to read or really like watch TV or movies even. So but I went away not long ago to the countryside in California, and I read a lot of My Autobiography of Carson McCullers by Jen Chaplin, and I'm really into it. So she is writing a biography of Carson McCullers, but it's also about her own life too. So I feel like it's in conversation with the kind of work I want to be doing. But other than that, I am constantly playing video games. Just shout out to Animal Crossing for showing us a version of reality that is both deeply capitalist, but also very escapist. And I also played The Last of Us Part 1 and 2, which to me, it was like experiencing a novel in the form of a video game, because it's so well written and so well acted. I immediately, as soon as I finished both games, I went back and I played the first one all over again from the beginning. So I feel like that's a real hallmark of powerful storytelling.
You know, it's funny. My son is really into video games. He's 7, and he keeps wanting me to play with him because he's incredibly bored, but I've never gotten into it. So maybe I should do something like Animal Crossing or something like that with him that has like a narrative, because that would interest me and also have us do something together. So I'll check that out. Thanks for that. So I want to give a quick shout out to Outwrite for this phenomenal festival that they have done online this year. You know, we are having to innovate in multiple different ways to reach out to the literary community and find creative ways to put on the things that we normally would do in person, and do them virtually. So thank you to Outwrite for creatively putting this out there and making sure it happened this year. And there are 2 calls for submissions that are open right now through August 25th. The first one is a 10-year retrospective. So if you've ever written for Outwrite or participated with Outwrite within the last 10 years, you can submit to that call. And there's also a call for Black writers for We Got This, Imagination, Joy, and Liberation, which are all things, I mean, I'm about it. And that is also a part of this open submission through August 25th. And if you have more questions or want to know more, you can find Outwrite on Twitter at OutwriteDC. And that's gonna be it for us. Thank you so much for joining in, and I hope you all have a lovely, lovely evening. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.